Welcome to my Sacred Revenge channel, where betrayal isn't just exposed, it's answered.
Now that your husband is gone, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back. My daughter-in-law Selena declared across the polished oak dining table. My son Brandon just offered a weak smile and a nod. The house was never truly yours anyway, he added almost apologetically, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. I moved out the very next morning without uttering a single word of protest. Before I begin telling you my story, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and if you'd like to share your own story, feel free to write to us. The dining room felt profoundly different without Robert's steady presence. The grand mahogany table, which had cradled countless family dinners and lively conversations, now seemed vast and desolate, despite the three of us being seated around it. My gaze kept drifting to his empty chair, half expecting him to appear, his gentle smile and calming aura filling the void. It had been precisely 1 week since we laid Robert, my devoted husband of 32 years, to rest. One agonizing week since I'd stood by his graveside, feeling as though a vital piece of my soul had been brutally torn away. The grief remained a suffocating weight in my chest, making every breath a laborious effort. Pass the roast, Ophelia. Selena snapped, her voice cutting through the silence like shards of glass. My daughter-in-law Selena had never once spoken to me with genuine warmth. But tonight, there was a new edge, a chilling coldness that prickled my skin. My hands, still trembling slightly from the funeral's emotional toll, reached for the serving platter. At 71, I had foolishly believed I was prepared for this day, for the inevitable departure of a loved one. Yet nothing, absolutely nothing, could have braced me for the hollow ache that now relentlessly pursued my every step. Brandon, my 43-year-old son, sat rigidly between us, like a referee who had already decided which team to favor. He had barely cast a glance in my direction all evening, his attention fixed entirely on Selena, his wife of 15 years. This was the same boy who used to seek comfort in my lap when nightmares haunted his sleep, and now he couldn't even meet my gaze. The service was truly beautiful, wasn't it? I offered, desperately attempting to puncture the suffocating silence. Your father would have loved seeing so many people there, so much love. Selena deliberately set down her fork with a sharp click. Yes! Well, that's actually what we need to discuss with you, Ophelia. Something in her tone made my stomach clench into a hard knot. My eyes darted between her and Brandon, searching for any flicker of the warmth that should naturally exist between family members who had just endured a profound loss. Instead, I found only cold, calculating intent in Selena's eyes, an uncomfortable evasion in my son's. What do you mean? I asked, though a part of me already dreaded the impending answer. Selena straightened in her chair, adopting the rigid posture she always used when delivering non-negotiable ultimatums. I had witnessed this stance countless times before, usually when she was fabricating excuses for why Brandon couldn't visit me as often, or why cherished family traditions needed to be abruptly altered to suit her preferences. Brandon and I have been talking, she began, her voice dripping with that sickeningly false sweetness she employed when she desired something. Now that Robert is gone, this house is simply going to be too much for you to manage alone. I blinked, genuinely confused. Too much, I echoed. I've been managing this house for over 30 years. I know every creaking floorboard, every temperamental faucet. It's my home. Exactly the problem. Selena continued, her mask of pleasantness finally slipping, revealing a hint of her true disdain. You're not getting any younger, and maintaining a house this size is incredibly expensive. Brandon and I genuinely believe it would be best if you moved somewhere more suitable. The words struck me like a physical blow, reverberating through my very being. Moved. This was my sanctuary, my haven. Robert and I had meticulously built our entire life within these walls. Brandon had grown from a crawling infant to a grown man right here. Brandon finally spoke, his voice barely above a strained mumble. Mom, Selena's right. The upkeep alone will be overwhelming for you. It's just practical. I am not helpless, Brandon. I retorted, my voice cracking slightly despite my efforts to control it. And this house. Your father and I saved 4 years, sacrificed so much to buy this place. Every single room holds countless memories of our life together, our dreams. Selena's expression hardened, her lips thinning into a cruel line. Memories don't pay utility bills or property taxes, Ophelia. Be practical. I stared at her, this woman who had systematically, relentlessly pushed me out of my son's life for 15 years. The woman who had cunningly convinced Brandon that Sunday dinners with his mother were an unbearable burden, and that holiday visits needed to be balanced between families, which somehow always translated into more time spent with her relatives. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, though I could feel the frigid answer crystallizing in my stomach. We think you should look into one of those nice senior communities, Selena stated, her tone falsely saccharine, as if she were bestowing upon me a monumental favor. Somewhere with activities and people your own age. It would be so much better for you than rattling around in this big, empty house, lonely. I turned to Brandon, desperately clinging to a sliver of hope that he might, just might, disagree with this cruel plan. Brandon, you truly believe I should sell the house where you grew up, where your father and I? It makes sense, Mom. He interrupted, still steadfastly avoiding my gaze. And honestly, Selena and I could really use the space. We've been talking about expanding our family, and this house has so much potential for a growing family. The true meaning behind his words crashed over me like a frigid, merciless wave. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted my house. The home Robert and I had lovingly restored, room by painstaking room over 3 decades of shared life. Now that your husband is dead, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back. Selena's voice suddenly shed all pretense of civility, revealing the raw venom beneath. The house was never really yours anyway. It was his. The word his rolled off her tongue with casual cruelty, as if she were discussing the disposal of old unwanted furniture rather than summarily ejecting her deceased husband's mother. Brandon finally looked up then, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps even a sliver of guilt. But then he forced a smile and nodded, a chilling affirmation of Selena's words. She's right, Mom. This house was Dad's, and now it's mine. You were just living here. My world tilted violently on its axis. Just living here? As if 32 years of marriage, of building a life, of raising a family, amounted to nothing more than an extended house-a-sitting arrangement. See? I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. Inside, something profound was shattering. Not just my heart, but my fundamental understanding of who my son was, of what my family had truly become. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me, each muscle protesting. I'll need some time to 2 weeks, Selena cut me off, her voice sharp and uncompromising. That should be plenty of time to find somewhere suitable and arrange for movers. 2 weeks. Not 2 months, not even a reasonable timeline to grieve and plan, to gather the fragmented pieces of a lifetime. 2 weeks to dismantle an entire existence. Brandon finally looked directly at me, and what I saw there was far worse than anger or hatred. It was pure, unadulterated indifference, complete casual indifference to my profound pain. 4. The best mom, he mumbled, as if trying to convince himself as much as me. You'll see. I walked upstairs, each step feeling like I was ascending a treacherous mountain. Towards the bedroom I had shared with Robert. The room still carried the faint, comforting scent of his cologne. His reading glasses lay precisely where he had left them on the nightstand the night before his sudden heart attack. I sank onto the edge of our bed and stared at my reflection in the dresser mirror. The woman staring back seemed far older than 71. Her silver hair limp and her once vibrant blue eyes dulled by the twin assaults of shock and grief. In just 2 weeks, I would be forced to abandon this room. The very place where I had said my final goodbyes to Robert only 7 days prior. I would have to meticulously pack 32 years of marriage into cold, impersonal boxes and surrender it all to a son who had just, with such callousness, informed me that I had never truly belonged here anyway. But as I sat there in the deepening darkness, something else began to stir beneath the crushing weight of grief and shock. A small, hard kernel of resolute determination. Robert had always been the meticulous one, the one who effortlessly managed our finances. Yet he had meticulously taught me to be thorough, to pay unwavering attention to every detail, no matter how small. Tomorrow, I would begin making arrangements. I would call the bank and initiate the arduous process of discovering precisely what I was legally entitled to. Because if Brandon and Selena truly believed they could simply erase me from this family, without any consequence, they were about to be met with a most profound surprise. The first crucial step was to precisely ascertain what Robert had left behind and to whom. The morning sun felt strangely different streaming through the kitchen windows as I sat alone at the breakfast table, nursing my second cup of robust coffee. 10 days had elapsed since that horrendous dinner, and the house felt like it was holding its breath, patiently waiting for my departure. Brandon and Selena had already visited twice, ostentatiously assessing the space, measuring rooms, and loudly discussing renovations as if I were utterly invisible, a mere ghost. Yesterday, I had even overheard Selena on the phone with a contractor, brazenly scheduling estimates for once the old woman moves out. I had spent those 10 days in a peculiar bubble of numbness, mechanically sorting through belongings and valiantly attempting to ignore the gnawing knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. But this morning, a new resolve had settled over me. I finally felt ready to confront the practical matters Robert would have fully expected me to handle with competence. The drive to Sterling National Bank took a mere 15 minutes, winding through the familiar tree-lined streets of our tranquil neighborhood. I had made this exact drive for over 2 decades, usually with Robert comfortably in the passenger seat, diligently handling our banking affairs while I patiently waited in the car. He had always been fiercely protective of our finances, not because he didn't trust me, but because, as he often said, 'twas one less thing for you to worry about, my dear Ophelia. Now, I desperately wished I had paid far more diligent attention. Mrs. Albright, the bank manager, greeted me with the carefully measured sympathy reserved exclusively for recent widows. Mrs. Finch, I was so terribly sorry to hear about Robert. He was such a true gentleman, always asking about my grandchildren, so kind. Thank you, Eleanor, I replied, my voice a little unsteady. He spoke fondly of you, too. I settled into the plush chair positioned directly across from her expansive desk, my purse clutched tightly in my lap, a small anchor in a turbulent sea. I need to understand my financial situation. Robert handled absolutely everything, and I'm afraid I'm rather lost, truly. Eleanor's expression softened with genuine understanding. Of course, Mrs. Finch. Let me pull up your accounts right away. She turned to her computer, her fingers deftly clicking across the keyboard with practiced ease. After a moment, her eyebrows went up a little, showing a slight surprise. "Oh my," she mumbled. My heart pounded. "Something wrong?" I asked, my voice shaky. Had Brandon and Selena already gotten into our accounts somehow? "Nothing's wrong." "Exactly," Eleanor explained, her voice still a bit surprised. "It's just, there are many accounts here, Mrs. Finch, more than I expected." She said, "Let's start with the checking account you and Robert used for your house." She quickly printed a paper and slid it to me. The amount was small but enough for my needs for a few months if I was careful. I felt a huge sense of relief. Least I wouldn't be broke. Eleanor kept looking at her computer. "Also, there's a large savings account with both your names on it." Another paper appeared. This amount was much, much bigger, enough for me to live on for years if needed. "That's wonderful," I said, feeling some of the stress leave my body. Robert was always so good at saving. Yes, he was very organized, Eleanor agreed, but she was still looking at her screen with a small frown. "Mrs. Finch, I see several other accounts here that I need to check. Some seem to be only in your name." "When was the last time you looked at all your money accounts with Robert?" "My name only," I repeated, confused. "That doesn't sound right." "Robert handled all our money." Eleanor quickly typed on her keyboard again. "Our records show 4 more accounts. 2 certificates of deposit, a money market account, and this is interesting, a trust account set up 5 years ago." My head started to spin. I don't understand. Robert never told me about any of this. "May I ask, Mrs. Finch, did your husband ever have concerns about your family?" Eleanor asked, her voice softer. "Sometimes people open separate accounts to protect themselves." The question surprised me. "Protect me from what?" "I'm not sure what you mean." Eleanor paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes when families have difficult situations, like arguments over inheritances or outside pressure, they take steps to make sure their spouse is financially safe in the long run." I thought about how Robert had acted in the past few years, how he started asking specific questions about Selena's spending, how he became quiet when Brandon talked about their money troubles, how he always insisted on doing our banking himself, never letting Brandon come along even when he offered to help. "Can you tell me about these other accounts?" I asked, my voice very quiet. Eleanor printed more papers. "The first CD has been renewed every year for 7 years, earning interest. The second was opened 3 years ago. The money market account has been getting automatic transfers from your joint checking account. Small amounts like $50 here and there, but they added up over time." She gave me the papers. The numbers blurred. "These weren't small emergency funds. These were large sums of money, enough to buy a house, enough to live comfortably for many years. How is this possible?" I asked. "I never signed anything." "I never actually You did, Mrs. Finch," Eleanor said gently, pulling out a file. "Your signatures are on all the papers. It seems Robert brought you in to sign documents, probably telling you they were normal bank updates or insurance forms." Looked at the papers she showed me. My signature was there, dated and witnessed on forms I didn't remember signing. But when I looked at the dates, I could remember some of them. The day we updated our address after the house numbers changed. The time we switched to a new type of checking account. He never told me what I was really signing, I whispered. It's not unusual, Eleanor said carefully. Some spouses prefer to handle the details to avoid causing stress or confusion. And legally, Mrs. Finch, everything is correct. These accounts are truly yours? I tried to understand what this meant. While Brandon and Selena were happily measuring my kitchen and planning renovations, while they were treating me like a burden to be gotten rid of. I had a lot of money they knew nothing about, secrets my loving husband had kept. There's one. More thing, Mrs. Finch, Eleanor said, her voice even more careful. The trust account I mentioned. It's been getting money from a business account for the past 5 years. The Finch and Sons Construction Trust. My husband's company, I thought. I believe that was your husband's company, wasn't it? Yes, I confirmed, but Robert sold the business when he retired. Brandon said the money from the sale was barely enough to pay off old debts. Eleanor looked at her screen again, courting. To our records, the business account is still very active. There have been regular deposits and then transfers to your trust account, Mrs. Finch. I strongly believe you need to talk to the business accountant. You might have more money then? You realize? I departed the bank in a profound daze, my purse feeling unnaturally heavy with the weight of account statements and countless printouts. Instead of driving directly home, I instinctively pulled into the secluded parking lot of a charming little cafe and simply sat in my car, meticulously reading through every single document Eleanor had so kindly provided. The stark numbers did not lie. Somehow, without my faintest knowledge, Robert had been systematically, methodically protecting me. Every single account, every astute investment, every meticulously structured trust fund was intricately designed to ensure my complete financial independence, to shield me from potential hardship. As I painstakingly studied the trust account, statements, a chilling yet deeply comforting pattern gradually emerged. The deposits eerily corresponded with Brandon's sporadic visits over the past 5 years. Always larger amounts after Brandon had, with practiced casualness, asked his father for small loans, or when Selena had, with thinly veiled hints, lamented their persistent financial struggles. Robert had been consistently giving our son money. Yes, but he had simultaneously been protecting an equal or often greater amount for me. As if he had instinctively known that someday I might desperately need to stand entirely on my own, financially unburdened. My phone buzzed, startling me with a text message from Brandon. Mom, Selena found a realtor to list the house. We can start showing it next week. Hope you're making good progress on finding a new place. I stared at the message for a long, quiet moment, the words mocking me. Then I lowered my gaze, looking again at the voluminous bank statements sprawled across my lap. Brandon and Selena were so incredibly confident, so utterly certain they held all the cards, that they controlled my destiny. They had absolutely no idea that their meticulously crafted plans were built on a foundation they profoundly misunderstood. A foundation that was about to spectacularly crumble beneath them. Tomorrow, I would call the business accountant. I would uncover precisely what else Robert had left behind, what other protective measures he had secretly enacted. And then I would decide what to do with the overwhelming knowledge that my husband had loved me enough to ensure I would never, ever be at anyone's mercy. The grief was still there, a raw, sharp pain as fresh and cutting as ever. But underneath it, something else was quietly, powerfully growing. A quiet strength, a steely resolve I hadn't felt in years, perhaps ever. The accounting office of Morrison and Partners was nestled inconspicuously in a modest strip mall. Sandwiched between a bustling dry cleaner and a generic tax preparation service, I had never set foot in this place before. Robert had always insisted on handling all the business meetings himself, claiming it was boring paperwork that would only give you a headache, my dear Ophelia. Now, with chilling clarity, I understood he had been protecting me from far more than just tedious paperwork. Brenda Albright looked to be roughly my age, with neatly steel-gray hair pulled back into a practical bun, and kind, perceptive eyes peering from behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had been diligently handling Finch and Sons Construction's books for over 15 years, and her expression when I had called her yesterday had been carefully, almost unnervingly, neutral. "Mrs. Finch," she said, gesturing with a graceful hand towards a comfortable chair positioned across from her perpetually cluttered desk. "First, please allow me to offer my deepest condolences. Robert was a truly good man and an exceptionally honest businessman. I'm genuinely going to miss our quarterly meetings, our conversations. Thank you." "Brenda," I replied, settling into the chair, my new voluminous bank statements tucked securely within my purse, a comforting weight. "I wish I could say I knew him as well in business as you did. I'm trying to understand our financial situation," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "And the bank mentioned ongoing business income that I was completely unaware of, a substantial sum." Brenda's eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "You weren't aware? That's quite unusual, Mrs. Finch. Robert spoke about you often." And I assumed she trailed off, seemingly reconsidering her words, weighing them carefully. "Please," I urged. "I desperately need to understand what's been happening." "My son explicitly told me the business was sold years ago and barely covered its debts, that it was a failure, sold." Brenda echoed, looking genuinely, profoundly confused. "Mrs. Finch and Sons Construction wasn't sold. It was meticulously restructured." She turned to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up various files. 5 years ago, Robert legally transferred ownership of all the company assets into a trust, the Finch and Sons Construction Trust. You are explicitly listed as the primary sole beneficiary. The room seemed to tilt slightly, a dizzying sensation. "I'm the owner of the construction company," I stammered, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "Well, the trust legally owns it, and you, Mrs. Finch, own the trust," Brenda patiently clarified. "It's actually been quite successful, surprisingly so. Your husband was incredibly careful about the contracts he accepted after the restructuring. Smaller jobs, reliable clients, a steady, predictable income rather than the volatile boom and bust cycle of larger commercial projects. A brilliant strategy." She printed out several pages and handed them to me. "These are the profit and loss statements for the past 5 years. As you can clearly see, the company has been consistently generating substantial revenue year after year." I stared at the numbers, my hands trembling slightly, the implications cascading over me. The annual profits were truly staggering, more than enough to fully explain the regular generous deposits I had seen meticulously listed in the trust account statements. "But Robert retired," I said weakly, the words barely a whisper. "He wasn't working anymore, was he? He stepped back from the day-to-day operations. Yes, Brenda confirmed. But he meticulously maintained oversight and handled all the larger, strategic decisions. The actual construction work has been expertly managed by Mr. Timothy Barnes. Believe you know him? I nodded, recalling Timothy. He had worked for Robert for over 20 years, starting as a young, eager apprentice and diligently working his way up to foreman. He had been at the funeral, one of the few individuals there who had appeared genuinely, profoundly grief-stricken, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with sorrow. Timothy has been essentially running the company for the past 5 years. Brenda continued, her voice steady and clear. Robert meticulously structured it so that Timothy receives a generous percentage of the profits as a performance bonus, which has kept him incredibly motivated and fiercely loyal. It's truly been a very successful, mutually beneficial arrangement. For everyone involved, why didn't Robert tell me any of this? The question escaped my lips as barely a whisper, laden with a complex mix of confusion, hurt, and dawning understanding. Brenda hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, treading carefully. Mrs. Finch, this might not be my place to say, but Robert was deeply concerned about family pressures. He specifically mentioned that your son, Brandon, had been struggling financially, and that his wife, Selena, possessed expensive tastes. Robert worried intensely that if the family knew about the continued business income, there would be immediate expectations and relentless demands that might seriously compromise your future financial security. The pieces of the puzzle were now falling into place with devastating, yet ultimately liberating, clarity. Every single time Brandon had, with feigned humility, asked his father for a loan. Every single time Selena had, with calculated casualness, made comments about how comfortable we seemed. Robert had been meticulously calculating how to assist our son without simultaneously sacrificing my own future independence. He was protecting me, I said, the words heavy with a profound, newfound realization. He was protecting both of you in different ways. Brenda gently corrected. The loans he made to Brandon over the years were substantial, yes, but they consistently came from the business operating account, not from your personal assets. Mrs. Finch, and he was incredibly careful to document absolutely everything properly, meticulously. She pulled out another meticulously organized file folder. These are copies of all the formal loan agreements between the business and your son. Robert adamantly insisted on treating them as legitimate business transactions, complete with rigid payment schedules and precise interest rates, ensuring their legal enforceability. I opened the folder with shaking hands, the weight of the paper feeling immense. Page after page of formal loan documents, each one impeccably signed by both Robert and Brandon. The amounts listed were staggering, tens of thousands of dollars, accumulated over the past 5 years, ostensibly for Brandon's various ill-fated business ventures and speculative investments. Has Brandon been making payments on these loans? I asked, though I already suspected the grim answer. Brenda's expression grew visibly uncomfortable. The payment schedule unfortunately shows significant arrears, Mrs. Finch. As of last month, the outstanding balance with accumulated interest is approximately $87,000. The number struck me like a physical blow, a harsh reality check. Brandon owed the family business, my business, nearly $90,000, while simultaneously, brazenly, claiming his. Father had left nothing but a mountain of debts, a colossal lie. What happens to these loan obligations now? I inquired, my voice barely a whisper. They automatically transfer with the business assets, Brenda explained. As the new legal owner of the trust, Mrs. Finch, you have the indisputable legal right to demand immediate payment or to meticulously restructure the terms as you see fit. I thought about Brandon and Selena, their gleeful measuring of my kitchen, their eager discussions of renovations, their impatient planning of when they could begin showing the house to prospective buyers. They were so utterly confident, so unbelievably certain they deserved everything Robert had painstakingly built, everything he had meticulously accumulated. "There's one more thing you should know, Mrs. Finch," Brenda said, her voice even more careful now, a somber undertone. "Just last month, your son Brandon directly contacted me. He stated that with his father's passing, he would be taking over immediate management of all the business affairs. He explicitly asked me to prepare transfer of ownership documents, and I informed him that I would absolutely require written authorization from the trust beneficiary from you, Mrs. Finch. He seemed genuinely surprised that you were involved in the business structure at all, utterly unaware. So Brandon had been meticulously planning to claim the business along with the house, fully assuming I was too grief-stricken and naive to comprehend the intricate web of deception unfolding around me. The betrayal cut deeper than I had ever thought possible, a fresh wound in my already bleeding heart. "Brenda, I need to ask you something highly confidential," I said, leaning forward, my voice low and urgent. "If I wanted to meticulously maintain the current business structure with Mr. Barnes continuing to expertly manage operations, would that be entirely feasible?" "Absolutely, Mrs. Finch," Brenda affirmed, a visible sense of relief washing over her features. "Timothy has been desperately hoping to hear from you, actually. He's deeply concerned about the company's future and his own job security, understandably so. If you are willing to maintain the status quo, I truly believe you would find him exceptionally reliable and profoundly grateful for the continued opportunity." I gathered up all the bewildering papers, my mind reeling with the monumental implications of what I had just learned. The business was unequivocally mine. The substantial debt Brandon had accumulated was real and legally enforceable, every penny. And neither he nor Selena had the faintest idea that their meticulously crafted plans were built on a precarious foundation of self-serving lies and arrogant assumptions. "I'd like to schedule a meeting with Mr. Barnes as soon as humanly possible," I declared, my voice firm, resolute, "and I want to thoroughly understand all of my options regarding the outstanding loans." "Every single legal avenue, of course, Mrs. Finch. Shall I call Timothy this very afternoon to arrange it?" Brenda inquired. "Yes, please." "And Brenda, I would profoundly appreciate it if this conversation remains strictly confidential for now. Absolutely. Mrs. Finch, client confidentiality is sacred, the bedrock of this business." As I drove home, my phone buzzed with another irritating text message from Selena. "Ophelia, the realtor, wants to schedule a photographer for tomorrow. Make sure the house is perfectly clean and decluttered. First impressions matter immensely. For potential buyers, you know." I stared at the message for a long, quiet moment before tucking my phone away without responding, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. Let them meticulously plan their photography session. Let them naively imagine their grand future in-me house, spending money they erroneously believed they had inherited. They had absolutely no idea that the very foundation they were constructing their greedy dreams upon was about to spectacularly crumble beneath them, leaving them with nothing but shattered illusions. That evening, I purposefully sat in Robert's study for the very first time since his untimely death, surrounded by his meticulously organized files, a silent testament to his foresight. Now, with a profound clarity that brought tears to my eyes, I understood why he had been so incredibly meticulous about record-keeping. Why he had adamantly insisted on proper documentation for every single transaction, no matter how small. He had been building a formidable fortress around me, brick by painstaking brick, transaction by careful transaction, a sanctuary of financial security. And tomorrow, I would begin the arduous yet immensely satisfying process of learning precisely how strong those protective walls truly were, how impenetrable his love had made my future. Timothy Barnes's calloused, weathered hands wrapped around his steaming coffee mug as we sat in my kitchen the very next morning. At 55, he still possessed the broad shoulders and rough palms of a man who had dedicated his entire life to building things, to the honest labor of creation. But his eyes held a weariness I had never before witnessed, a profound sadness. "Mrs. Finch, I got to be honest with you," he began, his voice rough with raw emotion, a gravelly whisper. "I've been worried sick ever since Mr. Robert passed. Brandon came by the job site last week, talking about evaluating assets and streamlining operations. It didn't sound good for folks like me, for our future." I poured myself another cup of comforting coffee, using the familiar mundane routine to steady my frayed nerves, to anchor myself. "Timothy, what precisely did my son tell you?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. "He said the family was apparently going through some significant financial difficulties. That tough decisions would need to be made about the business, about its very survival. He explicitly wanted me to give him a complete list of all our current contracts, every piece of equipment, and all our cash flow projections." Timothy's jaw tightened, a muscle clenching visibly. He also brazenly asked about the keys to the equipment, yard, and the main office, demanding access. "And what did you tell him, Timothy?" "That I'd need to talk to whoever was actually in charge now. The rightful owner," he stated, meeting my eyes directly, his gaze firm and resolute. "Mr. Robert always told me that if anything ever happened to him, I should patiently wait for proper instruction from the legal owner, from you. He never, ever said it would be Brandon." He was clear about that. A wave of immense relief flooded through me, washing away a significant portion of my anxiety. Robert had indeed prepared for this precise scenario, meticulously ensuring that Timothy would act as a diligent guardian of the business, rather than simply handing it over to anyone who falsely claimed authority. "Timothy, I need to share something critically important with you." Began, my voice low and serious. "But I need your absolute word that this conversation remains strictly between us for now. Our secret." His expression instantly grew serious, reflecting his unwavering loyalty. "You have it, ma'am. My word of honor." I carefully spread out the various documents Brenda had given me the previous day, the evidence of Robert's foresight. Own Finch and Sons Construction. Timothy. Not Brandon, not the estate, me. Robert legally transferred absolutely everything into a trust 5 years ago, and I am the sole indisputable beneficiary. Timothy's eyes widened dramatically as he meticulously studied the official papers, a look of profound astonishment on his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he exclaimed, a soft expletive of surprise. "Pardon my language, ma'am, but Mr. Robert was always thinking 3 steps ahead, wasn't he? A true genius." "He was indeed," I agreed, a faint smile touching my lips. "And according to these comprehensive records, the business has been quite profitable under your exceptional management, Timothy. Remarkably so." A flush of deserved pride briefly crossed Timothy's features. "We've built a truly good reputation, Mrs. Finch. Steady, loyal clients, consistently quality work, fair prices always. Mr. Robert meticulously taught me that repeat. Customers are worth far more than any single big score, any quick profit. Consistency over greed. Ah, I want you to continue exactly as you have been," I said, firmly, decisively. "But I need to fully understand something. Brandon has been less than honest about the family's financial situation, profoundly so. Can you tell me about any interactions you've had with him regarding business matters over the years?" Timothy's expression darkened, a shadow falling across his face. "There have been several over the years, Mrs. Finch. He'd occasionally come around when Mr. Robert wasn't present, asking pointed questions about cash flow, wanting to know about upcoming payments from clients, almost too eager. A couple of times, he brazenly suggested that maybe the business could help him out with some temporary funding for his various investment opportunities, which never seemed to materialize." "And what did you tell him, Timothy?" "The need to talk directly to his father, Mr. Robert. I'm not stupid, Mrs. Finch," he declared, his voice growing harder, laced with a hint of indignation. I could clearly see what was happening, what he was trying to do. "Last year," Timothy continued, his voice low and firm, "he actually showed up at the bank on the very same day we deposited a massive payment from the Morrison office building project. Just a coincidence," he claimed. But he was mighty interested in talking to the teller about the deposit details. Far too interested. My stomach clenched, a cold knot forming. Brandon had been meticulously monitoring the business income, probably trying to cunningly time his incessant requests for loans to coincide with periods of maximum available cash. A calculating predator. "Timothy, I want to ask you something, and I need your complete, unvarnished honesty," I pressed, my gaze piercing. "Do you truly think Brandon understands how much money has actually been flowing through this business? The sheer volume?" Timothy was quiet for a long, contemplative moment, carefully considering his words. "I think he knows it's more than your family let on, Mrs. Finch, far more. But I honestly don't think he knows the full, true extent of it. Mr. Robert was very careful about keeping business and personal finances entirely separate, at least on paper, to create a clear division." "What do you mean, Timothy?" "Well, your husband was incredibly smart about it, Mrs. Finch, when Brandon would persistently ask for help. Mr. Robert would often tell him the business was struggling, that margins were tight, but then he'd always find a way to help anyway, usually by structuring it as a loan from the business account rather than directly from his personal funds. Creating a paper trail." Timothy pulled out his own small, worn notebook, its pages dog-eared from years of diligent use. "I meticulously keep track of everything, Mrs. Finch. It's a habit Mr. Robert drilled into me, a core principle, according to my meticulous records. Brandon has received payments totaling about $93,000 over the past 5 years. Every penny documented. The number was even higher than what Brenda had shown me at the bank. Payments, not loans," I murmured, the distinction painfully clear. "That's what I mean about Mr. Robert being smart," Timothy clarified. "He'd structured them as legitimate loans on paper, complete with formal payment schedules and everything, making them legally binding. But he never actually enforced the payment terms, never demanded repayment. Brandon would miss a payment, and Mr. Robert would just let it slide, giving him infinite leeway. So Brandon truly thinks he owes nothing. Brandon acts like he owes." "Nothing," Timothy corrected, a subtle emphasis on the word acts. Whether he truly believes it or just pretends to believe it, I can't definitively say. Mrs. Finch, that's for him to reconcile. As if summoned by our profound conversation, I heard the familiar sound of a car door slamming in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could clearly see Brandon's sleek black SUV parked directly behind Timothy's sturdy work truck. "That's my son," I said quietly, a new resolve hardening my voice. "I don't want him to know we've been discussing business matters." "Not yet." Timothy nodded, his movements swift and efficient, quickly gathering up the papers I had shown him, concealing them from view. "Mrs. Finch, whatever you ultimately decide to do, you have my full, unwavering support. Mr. Robert was a good man, a truly exceptional man, and he trusted you enough to meticulously put everything in your name. That's more than good enough for me, Mrs. Finch. More than enough." Brandon walked in without bothering to knock, a long-standing habit that would have deeply irritated Robert, but which I had grudgingly learned to accept over the years, to endure. "Morning, Mom," he said, barely casting a fleeting glance at Timothy, his eyes already assessing the kitchen. "I wasn't expecting company this early." "Timothy just stopped by to check on me," I said smoothly, my voice calm and even. "You know how thoughtful he's always been, so concerned, right?" Brandon mumbled, his attention already elsewhere, his eyes scanning the kitchen's layout as if meticulously evaluating its potential for resale, for profit. "Actually, Timothy, I'm glad you're here. We need to talk about the business situation. With Dad gone, there are going to be some significant changes. The family needs to make some practical decisions about assets and ongoing obligations." I watched this exchange with a strange, detached fascination. Brandon was so incredibly confident, so utterly certain of his self-proclaimed authority, his undeniable right to take control. He had absolutely no idea he was attempting to claim something that had never, not for a single moment, belonged to him. "What kind of changes, Brandon?" Timothy asked, his expression carefully neutral, devoid of any betraying emotion. "Well, we'll need to thoroughly evaluate whether it makes sense to continue operations or if it would be more prudent to liquidate all assets and settle any outstanding debts. A fresh start, so to speak." Brandon's tone was disturbingly casual, as if he were discussing something as trivial as what to have for lunch, completely detached from the human impact. "I see," Timothy replied, his voice still carefully measured. "And who precisely is making these decisions, Brandon?" Brandon blinked, clearly caught off guard by the unexpected question, his composure momentarily faltering. "The family, of course. I'll be handling Dad's business affairs going forward. Every single detail. Will you now?" Timothy's voice remained carefully neutral, but I detected the subtle, almost imperceptible emphasis on the word "you," a quiet challenge. "Ah, you might want to make some fresh coffee," Brandon said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand, just as he always had when important, manly conversations were taking place, assuming my immediate compliance. "Timothy and I need to discuss some technical details, some complex figures." But I didn't move. For the very first time in years, I stood my ground, my feet firmly planted. "I'll stay, thank you," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "Is my kitchen, and Timothy is my guest. We are having a conversation." Brandon looked genuinely surprised, a flicker of irritation crossing his face, but he merely shrugged, dismissing my defiance. "Fine, Timothy. I'll need you to prepare a complete, detailed inventory of all equipment, vehicles, and current contracts. I'll also need immediate access to all the business accounts so I can accurately assess the financial situation. Every ledger. I'd be happy to help with that, Brandon, Timothy said carefully, his eyes darting to mine for a split second. Eh? Silent acknowledgement. Who should I coordinate with regarding proper authorization for account access? What's the legal channel? With me, obviously. Brandon retorted, his voice rising, his confidence wavering slightly. And you have the legal authority to access. Finch and Sons construction accounts, why precisely? Because I'm Robert Finch's son and his sole heir, Brandon declared, his voice cracking with a forced authority. I see, Timothy replied, his tone chillingly calm. And do you possess any official documentation showing that you are legally authorized to act on behalf of the business? To wield its power. The kitchen fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the old clock above the sink. Brandon's face was reddening, a flush with mounting irritation and uncertainty. I could clearly see him struggling, trapped between his inherent arrogance and a dawning, unsettling realization. Look, Timothy, I don't think you fully understand the situation here, Brendan said, his voice taking on the condescending tone he invariably used when he felt challenged, when his authority was questioned. This isn't a hostile takeover, fight. I'm merely trying to clean up Dad's affairs and make sure everyone gets taken care of. But I can't possibly do that if you're going to deliberately make things difficult for me. I'm not trying to make things difficult, Brandon. Timothy replied evenly, his composure unshaken. I'm merely trying to precisely understand who I'm legally supposed to be taking orders from. Your father was always exceptionally clear about proper procedures and ironclad documentation. Always. He valued precision. Brandon turned to me, his eyes wide, clearly expecting my immediate, unquestioning support. Mom, explain to Timothy that I'm handling Dad's business matters now, that I'm in charge. I looked at my son, this man who was meticulously planning to sell my house out from under me, who had accumulated nearly $90,000 in debt while brazenly claiming his father left nothing behind but debts, leaving me destitute. And in that moment, I made my choice, a choice born of quiet strength. Actually, Brandon, I think Timothy is absolutely right to ask for proper documentation, I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady, firm. Your father was always very careful about these things, highly meticulous. He believed in doing things by the book. Brandon stared at me as if I had suddenly grown a second head, his mouth agape. What are you talking about, Mom? What is this nonsense? I'm talking about making absolutely sure everything is handled properly and legally, Brandon. Every single detail. Surely you can understand the immense importance of that, of following the law. For the very first time since this unsettling conversation began, Brandon looked profoundly uncertain, truly shaken. And watching that uncertainty slowly creep across his once arrogant features, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. Pure, unadulterated power. The phone call arrived at precisely 7 o'clock in the morning, 3 days after my quiet confrontation with Brandon in the kitchen. I had been anticipating it, a certainty. You cannot question someone's deeply ingrained, assumed authority without consequences, especially when that someone is accustomed to effortlessly getting his way, accustomed to absolute control. Mom, we need to talk now. Brandon's voice rasped, tight with barely controlled anger, a simmering rage. Selena and I are coming over. We're on our way. It's rather early, don't you think, dear? I inquired sweetly, feigning innocence. This can't wait, Mom. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, so be ready." The line went dead before I could even formulate a response. I deliberately took my time getting dressed, choosing an elegant navy blue dress that Robert had always said made me look particularly dignified, exuding quiet strength. If this was going to be a confrontation, a battle, I intended to face it properly, with grace and composure. They arrived exactly 20 minutes later, Selena's expensive heels clicking aggressively on the front porch, announcing their presence with unnecessary force. I opened the door just before they could even knock, maintaining the small, yet significant, advantage of being the gracious hostess in my own home. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, as if this were merely a casual social visit, a friendly call. Selena pushed past me, practically barging into the living room, her designer purse clutched tightly like a lethal weapon. Brandon followed, his face grim, a thundercloud. They both remained standing, pointedly positioning themselves directly between me and the door, a clear intimidation tactic I instantly recognized. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing," Brandon began, his voice dripping with barely contained exasperation. "But Timothy Barnes called yesterday and explicitly stated he can't provide me with any business information without proper authorization. What exactly did you tell him, Mom?" I settled comfortably into Robert's favorite armchair, the one with the best commanding view of the entire room, allowing me to observe their every nuanced reaction. "I simply told him to follow proper procedures, Brandon. Your father would have expected nothing less, a stickler for rules." "Proper procedures?" Selena's voice was shrill, piercing, bordering on a hysterical shriek. "Brandon is Robert's son and his sole heir. What more authorization does anyone possibly need, Ophelia?" "Legal authorization," I said calmly, deliberately, my voice like still water, yet holding an undeniable force. "The kind that comes with actual, undisputed ownership, Selena." Brandon's eyes narrowed, a glint of suspicion in their depths. "Are you talking about Mom? Dad's will clearly leaves everything to the family, to me. I'm the executor, which means I handle all the assets until probate is finally settled. It's my right." "Actually, Brandon, that's not quite accurate," I stated, my voice unwavering. I reached for the folder I had carefully placed on the side table, the one containing all the meticulous documents Brenda Albright had so kindly provided me with. Brandon and Selena both visibly tensed as I slowly, deliberately opened it, their eyes fixed on my every movement, filled with a mixture of apprehension and mounting dread. "Your father's will does indeed leave his personal possessions and this house to the family," I continued, maintaining my calm, measured tone. "But Finch and Sons Construction isn't part of his estate, Brandon. It hasn't been for 5 years, not legally." "What are you talking about, Mom?" Brandon demanded, his voice a bewildered bellow. I pulled out the trust documents, crisp and official, and gently set them on the coffee table between us, a silent, irrefutable declaration. Finch and Sons Construction has been legally owned by the Finch and Sons Construction Trust since 2019. And I, Brandon, am the sole indisputable beneficiary of that trust. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with disbelief and dawning horror. Selena reached for the documents first, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling uncontrollably as she frantically scanned the precise, uncompromising legal language. Brandon read over her shoulder, his face slowly draining of all color, turning a sickly pale shade. "This is impossible," Selena whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a desperate denial. You don't know anything about business, Ophelia. You never even balanced a checkbook in your life. You're absolutely right, Selena. I didn't, I conceded, my voice calm, almost detached. Your father meticulously handled all of that. But apparently, he understood things about our family situation that I was simply too naive, too trusting, to see clearly. Brandon sank onto the sofa, as if his legs had suddenly given out, unable to support his weight. But the business was struggling, he mumbled, his voice hoarse with confusion. Dad always said margins were tight, that there was barely enough to keep operations running, that it was a constant struggle. The business has been quite profitable, actually, Brandon, I corrected, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. Here are the detailed financial statements for the past 5 years. I handed him another set of papers, neatly organized, irrefutable evidence. Watching Brandon's face as he slowly processed the astonishing numbers was like witnessing someone suddenly realized they had been foolishly playing a simple game of checkers while everyone else, particularly his brilliant father, had been meticulously playing a complex game of chess. These profits, Brandon's voice was barely audible, a stunned whisper. Where did all this money go, Mom? Some of it went directly to you, Brandon, I said, my voice cutting through the silence, sharp and precise. Quite a lot of it, actually. I pulled out the extensive loan documentation, the final undeniable proof. $87,000 over 5 years, to be precise. Every single penny meticulously documented as a loan, not a gift. Selena snatched the loan papers from Brandon's trembling hand, her eyes scanning frantically, desperately seeking a loophole, a denial. These say loans, Wade. You explicitly told me those were gifts. You said your father was helping us get established, supporting us. They were gifts. Brandon insisted, but his voice completely lacked conviction, a hollow echo. Dad never asked for payments. He never even mentioned payment schedules. Actually, he did, Brandon, I said quietly, calmly dismantling his flimsy defense. Brenda Albright has meticulous copies of every single conversation, every missed payment. Every single time your father chose to graciously extend the terms rather than demand what you legally owed. Patiently waiting for you to repay him. I watched as the harsh reality of their precarious financial situation began to sink in, an avalanche of truth. Fair Brandon had meticulously built his entire financial life on the arrogant assumption that his father's boundless generosity would continue indefinitely, a never-ending wellspring. He had likely foolishly borrowed against those expectations, made foolish commitments based on money he erroneously believed was rightfully his, money he thought he would never have to repay. But this doesn't change anything. Selena suddenly shrieked, her voice taking on a desperate, frantic edge, clinging to her last hope. The house still goes to Brandon. That's worth far more than some little construction business, a mere trifle. Is it, Selena? I asked mildly, a challenging glint in my eyes. Selena's eyes flashed with a dangerous mixture of anger and panic, a volatile cocktail of emotions. Don't play games, Ophelia. This house is worth at least $400,000, a substantial fortune. You're absolutely right. It's a truly lovely property, I conceded, a knowing smile playing on my lips. Of course, there is the rather significant matter of the mortgage, isn't there? Brandon looked up sharply, his head snapping towards me. What mortgage, Mom? Dad explicitly said the house was paid off, free and clear. It was Brandon. But 18 months ago, your father took out a home equity loan. Quite a substantial one, actually. I pulled out the final set of documents, the ones I had miraculously discovered in Robert's study just yesterday. Filed meticulously in a folder boldly marked emergency funds. A home equity loan for $350,000, I continued, each word a hammer blow. The proceeds were directly transferred into the Finch & Sons Construction Trust account, which, as you now know, Brandon, means they became an integral part of my inheritance. My legal property. Psst. Selena's face went utterly white, drained of all color, her jaw slack. That's not possible. We would have known. We would have had to sign. It's the law. Your father was the sole legal owner of the house at the time. Selena, I calmly interrupted, cutting off her frantic protests. I was listed merely as a spouse with rights of survivorship, but not as a co-owner, not legally. He didn't need anyone else's signature, not even mine. Brandon stared at the loan documents as if they were written in a foreign, incomprehensible language, his mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the deception. But why would he do this, Mom? Why would he mortgage the house just to put money into a business account? Why such a convoluted scheme? For the very first time since this tumultuous conversation began, I allowed my carefully controlled emotions to surface, a raw, undeniable truth. Because he was protecting me, Brandon. He was meticulously making sure that no matter what unforeseen circumstances arose, no matter what happened after his passing, I would have complete financial security, an impregnable shield. Protecting you from what, Mom? Brandon's voice was hoarse, laced with a desperate plea. From this, I said, gesturing with an expansive sweep of my hand to the devastating scene unfolding directly in front of me, to their greed and betrayal. From being callously thrown out of my own home by family members who perceived me as a burdensome impediment instead of a cherished person. From being left with absolutely nothing while everyone else, like vultures, claimed what they arrogantly believed they deserved, leaving me to starve. Selena's carefully constructed composure finally, spectacularly, cracked completely. You manipulated him, she shrieked, her voice shrill with raw fury and indignation. You cunningly convinced a dying man to change everything, to betray his own son. Your father wasn't dying when he meticulously set up these trusts. Selena, I calmly corrected, meeting her furious gaze without flinching. He was planning, thoughtfully and deliberately. And the undeniable fact that he felt the profound need to plan for this precise scenario should tell you something deeply uncomfortable about how he truly viewed our family dynamics, how he perceived your intentions. Brandon's hands were shaking uncontrollably as he slowly, reluctantly set down the damning papers, his face a mask of utter defeat. Surely we can work something out, something agreeable, he pleaded, his voice weak, desperate. You don't truly want to run a construction business, do you? And this house is our family home, our legacy. It should remain in the family forever. It is staying in the family, Brandon, I stated, my voice firm and resolute. It's staying with me where it rightfully belongs, where Robert intended it to be. But the mortgage payments. Selena cried desperately, grasping at straws. How will you possibly afford the astronomical mortgage payments? Ophelia, you old woman. The very same way your father meticulously intended. Selena, I replied, a triumphant smile now gracing my lips. With the consistent income from Finch & Sons Construction, Timothy Barnes assures me the business is quite stable and consistently profitable. I continued, relishing their growing despair. and Brenda Albright says the steady cash flow will easily cover the loan payments, with plenty left over for my living expenses, more than enough to live comfortably. I stood up slowly, smoothing my elegant navy dress, every movement deliberate, commanding. Now, I believe you both mentioned something about moving out, about my imminent departure. I still think that's an excellent idea, truly. My gaze swept over them, a quiet, knowing power in my eyes. Not for me, of course, but I'm absolutely certain you'll find somewhere lovely to start fresh. Somewhere fitting for your grand ambitions. Brandon stared at me as if truly seeing me for the very first time, his face a mixture of profound shock, confusion, and raw hurt. Mom, you can't be serious. After everything Dad did for you, everything our family means, our bond you're doing this to us. Your father did do everything for me, Brandon, I interrupted, cutting him off. My voice sharp and precise, echoing with a lifetime of unspoken truths. He loved me enough, truly loved me, to make sure I'd never ever be at anyone's mercy, including my own son's. And now, Brandon, I understand just how profoundly I needed that precise protection, how vital it was. Selena was already at the door, her face twisted with incandescent rage and utter disbelief, defeated but still defiant. This isn't over, Ophelia. We'll fight this. We'll contest everything, every single document, every single clause. You're more than welcome to try, Selena, I said calmly, watching her with a newfound, unwavering strength. But you should know that everything your father meticulously did was completely legal and impeccably documented, every single step. Brenda Albright is incredibly thorough, a true professional, and she's already diligently provided copies of all relevant documents to my attorney. So good luck with that, dear. Brandon paused at the door, his expression a bewildering mixture of confusion and profound hurt, a glimmer of the boy he once was. I don't understand, Mom. Why are you doing this to us, to your own family? Not doing anything to you, Brandon, I replied, my voice soft, yet filled with an iron will. I'm simply refusing to let you do it to me, to destroy me. That's the only difference. After they left, the sudden quiet of my house enveloped me. And in that profound silence, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. For the very first time since I was a young woman, I was completely, truly, unequivocally financially independent. I owed absolutely nothing to anyone, and no one, not even my own flesh and blood, could ever take away what I now possessed. Robert had given me far more than mere money. He had given me the immeasurable gift of freedom. 6 months later, I stood on the expansive deck of my new oceanfront cottage, watching the morning sun paint breathtaking golden streaks across the vast, tranquil Pacific. The soothing sound of waves crashing gently against the rocks below had become my daily symphony, a comforting melody. Replacing the familiar creaks and settling sounds of the old house, now a distant memory. The cottage nestled perfectly in the charming town of Seabreeze, was smaller, far more intimate than the imposing family home, but it was entirely mine, every square inch of it. Every piece of carefully chosen furniture, every decorative choice. Every single room reflected my unique taste, my personal aesthetic. Rather than the compromises I had made over 32 years of marriage, compromises that had often stifled my own desires, I discovered to my utter surprise and delight that I possessed excellent taste when nobody else was offering conflicting opinions, when I was free to be myself. Finch and Sons Construction continued to consistently thrive under Timothy Barnes's expert, dedicated management. He called me every Friday afternoon, without fail, to update me on current projects and upcoming contracts, his voice filled with quiet pride. And quarterly profits were now deposited directly and consistently into my personal account, a steady stream of income. I had meticulously kept my promise to maintain the business exactly as Robert had structured it, preserving his legacy, and everyone involved seemed infinitely happier for the stability and clear direction. The cottage itself had been an unexpected, joyous discovery. While meticulously researching properties in coastal California, I had learned that Robert had purchased it 3 years ago, quietly, secretly, through the construction trust. Brenda Albright had discovered the deed while diligently organizing business assets, along with a poignant handwritten note in Robert's familiar, elegant script for Ophelia's retirement when she's ready for ocean air and no schedule but her own. My gift to her freedom. Even in death, my beloved husband was still taking meticulous care of me, still showering me with his boundless love and foresight. This particular morning was special, however. My attorney was scheduled to arrive to finalize the very last piece of lingering business from my old painful life. Brandon and Selena had, as predicted, tempted to fiercely contest the meticulously laid trust arrangements. Hiring an exorbitantly expensive attorney who specialized in elder law and financial exploitation cases, believing they had a winning hand. It had not, to their bitter disappointment, gone well for them at all. The subsequent investigation had not only unequivocally revealed that all of Robert's financial arrangements were completely legal and impeccably executed, without a single flaw, but also that Brandon's colossal debt to the business was, in fact, significantly larger than anyone had initially calculated. Cumulated interest and various penalties had swelled the total to just over $96,000. Staggering sum. The doorbell chimed precisely at 10 o'clock. Mr. Simon Davies, no relation to Brenda from the bank, was a precise, meticulous man who firmly believed that punctuality was a direct reflection of character. He had been representing me since this entire unpleasant mess had begun, and his calm competence, his unwavering professionalism had been absolutely invaluable during the more stressful, emotionally draining moments. "Good morning, Ophelia," he said, settling into the comfortable armchair by the window that had become his customary spot during our meetings, a familiar sight. "I have the final settlement agreement for your meticulous review, from the French press I had recently learned to use. Another small yet significant freedom in my burgeoning new life," and sat across from him, my gaze expectant. "How did they take the final terms, Simon?" Simon's expression suggested a barely controlled amusement, a subtle smirk. "About as well as you'd expect, Ophelia." Brandon's attorney spent considerable time vehemently arguing that family obligations should somehow supersede legally binding business contracts, but ultimately, the law is quite clear and unambiguous on debt obligations. It's an open-shut case. He handed me the intricately detailed settlement documents. After 6 grueling months of intense legal wrangling, Brandon and Selena had finally, reluctantly, agreed to terms that fully acknowledged the entire debt and established a rigid payment plan that would take them a staggering 8 years to complete, assuming, of course, they never missed a single payment. A doubtful proposition. They tried once more to negotiate a family forgiveness clause. "A final desperate plea," Simon continued, a twinkle in his eye. Brandon actually broke down in the final meeting, claiming that you were destroying your relationship with your only son over mere money. A profound exaggeration. "And what did you tell them, Simon?" I asked, suppressing a smile. "I calmly reminded them that I was meticulously representing your financial interests, Ophelia, not your complicated family relationships." Though, he added, a wry smile finally breaking through. "I may have subtly mentioned that most mothers don't typically have to sue their own children to collect legitimate, legally binding debts. The settlement also included a particular provision. That brought me immense satisfaction, a small victory. If Brandon and Selena defaulted on any payments, the business could legally garnish Brandon's wages and place insurmountable liens on any property they foolishly purchased in the future, securing my interests. It was a robust safety net that would unequivocally ensure I received every single penny owed, regardless of their future financial decisions or their propensity for deceit. "There's just one more thing, Ophelia," Simon said, pulling out a separate, unassuming envelope. "This arrived for you yesterday, a special delivery." The envelope was addressed in Brandon's familiar, yet now almost unrecognizable handwriting. Inside was a brief, simple note on plain paper. "Mom, I know you probably won't forgive me for fighting you on this, for trying to take everything, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand what Dad was doing. It took losing almost everything for me to truly see how much I'd selfishly taken for granted, how blind I was. Selena and I are now attending marriage counseling, desperately trying to salvage what's left, and I'm working 2 jobs, often 18 hours a day, to meet the payment schedule, to repay my debt. I'm sincerely hoping that someday you might be willing to talk to me again, to perhaps offer some forgiveness. I'm truly sorry for everything, Mom. Brandon." I carefully folded the letter and gently set it aside. The apology was surprisingly genuine. I could sense it, feel the weight of his regret, but it was also 6 months too late, a hollow echo, and unequivocally motivated by dire consequences rather than any true, heartfelt remorse or awakening. "Conscience, any response you'd like me to convey, Ophelia?" Simone asked. "Ever professional?" "No," I replied, my voice firm. "If Brandon genuinely wants to rebuild a relationship with me, he can do it the very same way he'll pay off his substantial debt gradually, consistently, and over a very long time. Actions, not words, will prove his sincerity." After Simon left, I took my steaming coffee out to the tranquil deck and reread Brandon's letter again, pondering its deeper meaning. The grief was still present, a persistent ache, not just for Robert, my beloved husband, but for the son I had believed I had lovingly raised, and for the family relationships I had once so naively believed were real and unbreakable. But underneath the sadness, something far stronger now resided, a quiet, unyielding power. A deep, profound satisfaction that I had finally, unequivocally, stood up for myself when it mattered most. When my very existence was threatened, my phone rang, interrupting my introspective thoughts. The caller ID displayed a number I didn't immediately recognize, but something about it felt strangely familiar. A distant echo. "Hello, Mrs. Finch. This is Olivia Davies, Simon's daughter. Hope you don't mind me calling unexpectedly." I did remember Olivia, a compassionate nurse who worked at the regional hospital. Simon had occasionally mentioned her during our meetings, her dedication to helping others. "Of course not, dear," I replied, my voice warm. "How can I possibly help you, Olivia?" "Well, it's actually how you might help us, Mrs. Finch," she corrected gently. Mom told me about your profound situation, that how you had to completely rebuild your life after your challenging family difficulties, your painful betrayal. I'm actually starting a support group for women who've had to bravely deal with financial manipulation by family members. Ah. And I was wondering if you might be willing to courageously share your experience, your story, with them. It could truly help so many. The request caught me completely off guard, a surprising proposition. I'm not sure I'd know what to say, Olivia. My story is so personal, so raw. You'd be surprised, Mrs. Finch, how many women find themselves in remarkably similar, devastating situations, Olivia explained, her voice earnest. Adult children who feel absolutely entitled to their parents' assets, brazenly stealing. Spouses who deviously hide critical financial information, creating webs of deceit. Family members who tragically mistake kindness for weakness, preying on vulnerability. Your story, your incredible journey, could truly empower other women too. Understand their inherent rights and find the courage to protect themselves, to reclaim their lives. I thought about this for a long moment. Watching a pelican gracefully dive for fish in the shimmering bay below, a symbol of resilience. 6 months ago, I had been a grieving widow facing potential homelessness at the cruel hands of my own son and daughter-in-law. Today, I was unequivocally financially independent, living precisely where I wanted to live, accountable to no one but my own free spirit. When would you like me to speak, Olivia? I asked, a newfound purpose stirring within me. Really, Mrs. Finch, you'll do it! Olivia's voice was filled with an audible gasp of delighted surprise. I think I will, dear, I confirmed, a quiet satisfaction in my tone. But not about revenge or bitter legal battles. I want to talk about the profound difference between being a genuinely loving family member and being a pathetic doormat, trampled upon. About the immense importance of understanding your own financial situation intimately and thoroughly. About the incredible gift Robert, my beloved husband, gave me when he meticulously protected my future, even from our own son. His love was my shield. We scheduled the speaking engagement for the following month, a new chapter beginning. After hanging up, I realized that helping other women navigate similar harrowing situations felt like a true purpose, a profound calling, a meaningful way to honor both Robert's unwavering protection and my own hard-won independence. That evening, I did something I had now started doing every single night since moving to the enchanting cottage. I sat on my deck with a perfectly chilled glass of wine and watched the sun slowly, majestically set over the Pacific, painting the sky with fiery hues. Taking time to profoundly appreciate the simple, yet profound, fact that this breathtaking view, this profound peace, this absolute freedom, was entirely mine, earned through struggle and perseverance. No one could ever take it away from me. No one could ever vote me out of my own life, out of my own destiny. No one could ever decide I was disposable, a mere inconvenience. The cottage was serenely quiet, save for the rhythmic, soothing murmur of the ocean's eternal conversation, with the shore and the distant, mournful call of seabirds settling in for the night, a lullaby of nature. Tomorrow, I would tend to my flourishing garden, perhaps drive into town for a delightful lunch at the quaint little bistro where the owner always, without fail, saved me the best table by the window, a small luxury I now cherished. Simple pleasures that belonged entirely to me, undeniably mine. Brandon's substantial debt would eventually be paid. Whether he managed it responsibly or the business had to legally garnish his wages, an inevitable consequence. The meticulously crafted legal settlement ensured that justice would be served, unequivocally, regardless of his future choices or his attempts to evade responsibility. But the real victory wasn't merely financial. It was the profound, liberating knowledge that I had finally found the immense strength, the unwavering courage to demand the respect I so deserved, to stand tall and reclaim my dignity. As the last golden light faded from the sky, painting the horizon in shades of deep indigo and soft violet, I raised my glass in a silent, heartfelt toast to Robert, wherever he was, feeling his presence near. He had loved me enough to ensure I'd never be helpless, never be dependent on the fleeting mercy of people who, in their greed, saw me as utterly expendable, a burden. And he had loved me enough to meticulously make sure that when the inevitable test came, when my strength was truly challenged, I would possess absolutely everything I needed to pass it with flying colors to emerge victorious. The ocean continued, its eternal conversation with the shore, a timeless rhythm, and I sat in my own cherished home, on my own peaceful deck, living my own authentic life. Finally, truly understanding what profound freedom really meant. It meant never again having to beg for a place at a table that should have been unequivocally mine by right. It meant boundless peace, a calm that settled deep within my soul.